Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another fabulous evening with the Virtual Tasting Society. Tonight, we're joined by Joshua Hatton from Single Cask Nation. Couple little housekeeping things just for some of the new people joining us tonight. Please keep yourself on mute unless you want to ask a question. That way, background noises don't distract us while we're finding out all this cool stuff about this awesome smelling whiskey. I really was having a hard time pouring it and not trying it. Anyway, feel free to put notes in the chat, talk to each other. We're here to get nerdy and learn stuff. And with that, Joshua, take it away.
Yeah, beauty. Jane, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I realize Vadim is he's wandering around Scandi country right now, isn't he? He's in
Yeah, he's
Norway or
in
something.
Norway. He's up by the Northern Lights tonight.
Ah,
Well, actually,
amazing.
it's 4 o'clock in the morning there, so they're sleeping by now.
Well, thanks for everybody for coming out. I realize for everybody on here, for most people on here, it's 7 p.m., but it's officially 10 p.m. for me. So my night is both ending and starting at the same time, which is nice. Good way to end your night with seven whiskeys. So yeah, we've got seven whiskeys here, and in the case of wow, I guess just in the case of one, which is the first whiskey we're tasting, it's the first from this distillery we've ever bottled. So whiskey number one is our Tullabarden. It's a 9-year old, and it's sort of an unusual cask treatment on this, and I mean everybody's familiar with the idea of finishing a whiskey, right? You get a whiskey that's 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, matured in bourbon barrels, and then put it into a sherry cask or some sort of an ex-wine cask for a couple of years, and boom, you have a finished whiskey. That's the way we see all finishes all around the world. This one's a little different. It's almost in reverse. So this Tullabarden spent 1 year in refill bourbon and then 8 years in first fill bourbon. So it's this reversed finishing, and basically what they decided to do is take some spirit that was in wood that was offering up no flavor whatsoever, and said we need to just put our foot on the accelerator pedal and actually give this spirit some character. And I'm really glad that they did. And when I say they, this isn't something that we put together. This was a cask that we got in our warehouses once we joined Artisanal Spirits Company, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Um, but this is our first Tullabarden, and I don't like I don't like saying bad things, so I'm going to try to say a bad thing in a nice way. Tullabarden, I've never been very excited about Tullabarden, and I would argue Jason's never been very excited about Tullabarden. It's a pretty large distillery. It's about 30 minutes or so just outside of Glasgow. It's a Highland distillery, and predominantly what they do is they produce malt to go into some sort of blend. They do have some of their own proprietary bottlings, which did come to the US, but it's that same old story, right? Where you've got a distillery that makes remarkable liquid, but they tend to bottle it at 40%. They chill filter it within an inch of its life and maybe add a bit of color to it. And it's sort of a shadow of what it could be. So a lot of what we see of Tullabarden isn't necessarily its full potential. So in the past 13 going on 14 years of Single Cast Nation being an entity, we avoided Tullabarden because we didn't really have any full knowledge of it, and it's not a sexy name. No one's typically interested in looking for Tullabarden when you're an independent bottling company who needs to make profit to feed, children. You say, well, maybe we don't bottle whiskey from that distillery because who's going to be interested? It's not a sexy name. But then we said, screw it. And we saw this cask on our list and we received the sample and we're blown away. Like after 9 years, you give this a nose at 61.5% alcohol. doesn't burn my nose at all, and it's just like a tropical fruit bomb on the nose. It's persimmon, it's pineapple, it's like unripe mango going on in there. There's really a lot of really fruity notes going on, and when Jason and I select casks, right, it's we have a very specific process. We nose a whiskey first, and if it's intriguing, then we'll take a sip. And if it's not intriguing, we won't even waste our taste buds on it. But this one really had us sitting for a while. And I remember saying to Jason, like, is this that good? This can't be that good. Is that good? It is that good. Okay. We will taste that in a minute. And so we put it to the side. We went on to other samples. We came back. And even after some sherry cask whiskeys that were next to it, this still stood out and it was quite special. So then we gave it the old sip, which I'm going to do now. Cheers, l'chaim, prost, kampai, other cheers-like words.
Sure.
Wanjava, yeah. Skol, there you go. For Vadim, right? Just great texture on there, which is what Jason and I always look for. Yes, it's the first, well, I don't, it's the first whiskey of my day. I don't know if it's the first whiskey of your day, the first whiskey of my day, and it's got a little bit of heat going on, but that texture just sort of comes to the rescue and sort of saves the tongue on that one. If you've got some water, definitely add some water to this one. You know, we found that it increases the overall viscosity, but it brings out some slightly more earthy tones coming through, earthy and malty tones coming through.
I got a question.
Mm.
When you guys are doing all these tastings and selecting, is there a strength that you start at and then add water and see what how the whiskey changes? Does that factor into how you pick the casks?
Water never factors in. So we receive all of the samples at full cast strength, and we make our decisions based on that whiskey at full cast strength. There's been some occasions, like when we do rums, quite often we will have to play with water in those cases because the rums that we go after are rums that are typically matured, in the place of origin, right? So if it's in Barbados, you're dealing with that island climate, right? Or if it's a Brazilian rum, you're dealing with that Brazilian climate. And we find we'll get those samples and those rums will be 69, 72, 74% alcohol. And we're not Bacardi, we're not doing 151. We're trying to bottle drinkable, more easily accessed spirit. So in those cases, we'll dilute, sometimes, in the mid to upper 50s to wherever we feel it drinks best. But for the most part, when it comes to whiskey, be it Scotch whiskey or American whiskey or world whiskey, we do not play with water. We just sort of let the cask be what the cask is.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, I like this fruit compound butter note on the palate before water. I love this.
Yeah, it was just such a bizarre, I'm like, I haven't made a fruit compound butter in a couple of hot minutes. So it's like, oh, that's interesting.
Right?
But it's that I see what you mean by the texture because it's very, very buttery, very rich almost.
Hmm.
Like it does change very much with the water. I'm like debating if I need to drink it without or what use it the way it is. So it's lovely stuff.
Yeah, at 61.5, and actually I think when we got the spreadsheet, it had a projected ABV, which I think was closer, at least on the paperwork, it said like 62 something. And so we thought that, this would likely, light our mouths on fire. And it really didn't. It's got just good weighty spirit to it, right? Which is, again, back to my original statement about Tullabarton. I would love to see this distillery release more of its own whiskey and maybe do it at 46%, non-chill filtered, something like that, just to let it shine. You know, Glen Murray, which we're going to taste at Glen Murray a little later on, has always been one of those distilleries that traditionally would bottle at 40% alcohol, and is just not living up to its potential. But Glen Murray remains one of our most favorite distilleries to bottle whiskey from, because at full cask strength, it's just loaded with flavor, loaded with texture. There's tons going on. So this was our first Tullabarden. And after bottling this, we know this will not be our last Tullabarden. We'll continue to look at these because it's pretty special stuff. And the price was just damn good at this. This is $85 on our website for a 9-year-old single malt, single cask strength Scotch whiskey. That price is kind of unheard of these days, and we knew we could do it, so we did it. With that said, really quickly, any and all of these whiskeys, if anybody's interested in purchasing these, if you use promo code VTS, so Virtual Tasting Society 2024, you'll get 10% off your entire cart. And if your cart goes $300 or more, you save on the shipping as well. You get free shipping. So just keep that in mind. And that's only for tonight. That's going to go away at, I think, 3 a.m. my time, if I'm not mistaken. So midnight your time. So we like this one. Good start to the tasting. Yeah. Okay. The cats like it. Cool. Um, let's move on to the second one. I want to talk about a Thrusk a bit, but I want to talk about some changes to Single Cask Nation on the whole, because more often than not, these sort of questions sort of come up after news came out that we were acquired by Artisanal Spirits Company. So I want to address what has been sort of the elephant in the room since January 4 of this year, but addressing elephants is always easier when there's whiskey in the glass. So whiskey number 2 is our Thrusk. It's an 11-year-old that was 9 years in, we think, refill bourbon, in 2 years in first fill Oloroso. And we're looking at 56.7% on this one. And this one, I wish I could take credit for this. Sometimes I'm jealous of Jason and his Scottish wit. He's so much wittier than I am. And you get that Scottish accent going and the charm kicks in. He could say anything. And people say, oh, listen to his voice. So when he talks about a Thrusk, and this has been our sort of internal conversation about a Thrusk, like a Thrusk whiskey is a specialist whiskey. It's not for everybody. Not everybody reaches for a Thrusk, right? It's not like, Glenfiddich or Glenlivet or, insert ubiquitous distillery here with more obvious whiskey flavors. This is like fetishist whiskey. This is like whiskey for people who enjoy ball gags and things like that, right? Again, Jason's words, not mine. Jason's words. But yeah, right. I mean, what I enjoy about this, and Jason, you will have heard some of this chatter last night. This is what I like about a Thrusk is it's doing two things. It's odd, it's unusual, it sort of stops you in your track and makes you think about what's going on in the glass. And I mean, at the end of the day, as an independent bottler, isn't that what our aim is? Like, yes, we want to bottle some solid drinkers that you could just like pour and share and just, brainlessly have some chatter and the whiskey is sort of the background to the conversation. And then sometimes you want to bottle things that are incredibly thoughtful or thought-provoking. And that's where I think this whiskey kind of lives. It's unusual. It takes you by surprise, and it's old school in style, like a Thrusk, Ben Nevis, Springbank. But I'd even argue Fettercairn, produces this sort of old style whiskey, Ardent American, right? It's a whiskey that seems to be of yesteryear. That's really nice. Anyway, so all of these whiskeys that we have bottled, 7 whiskeys in all, were pulled from our new warehouses. So on January 3rd, 2024, Jason, Jess, and I were the proud owners of about 30 casks in our warehouse. And yeah, I would argue, maybe at the beginning of 2023, towards the end of 2022, that number of casks was likely closer to 100. And then we just started working through them, bottling them, and so on, and not replenishing the stock because the cost for casks nowadays is obscenely high. It's far too expensive for us to buy a cask and bottle it and be able to sell it at a reasonable price. And the availability simply wasn't there. So we were whittling down and whittling down and whittling down. And then towards the middle to the end of 2023, as our conversations with artisanal spirits are carrying on and we're getting an understanding of what they have in their warehouse, we're getting excited about that. When January 4 came around and we signed the paperwork, and then we get to look at what's in their warehouse, we went from 30 casks to 18,000 casks of whiskey available to us. Yeah, that's 600 times more casks than we had on January 3rd. That's pretty fucking awesome. So that gives us a number of distilleries that we simply hadn't had access to. Casks purchased at prices that were pre-whiskey boom, pre whiskey investment scheme things going on, like actual pricing where if we wanted to bottle that whiskey, we can bottle it and sell it for $10 to $11 per year, right? Which is always sort of our aim, which we were starting to get away from. So this was incredibly exciting. Another thing about this was it gave us access to 50 filling contracts with 50 different distilleries. So the access to stock and stock replenishment is there. So as we were having this ongoing conversation of what it would look like to join artisanal spirits, what it would mean for us as a bottling company, every conversation seemed, boy, this almost seems too good to be true. And the fact of the matter is it was true, but it wasn't too good to be true. It was just simply true. And so we've joined artisanal spirits. We have access to these 18,000 casks. We still have full control of all the casks that we select, where we put those casks, whether they come to the US for our online, which is what we're tasting today, or for retail, or for our global markets. And we are in full control of the direction of this company. So when all this happened, people reach out to us and they would say, is it congratulations or commiserations? And it is seriously congratulations. This is the move that we needed, that we worked toward for years, and we're really happy about it. So there's a lot more to that story. I love all these hearts flashing on Joe's screen. So if there's any other questions about the artisanal spirits acquisition, please, go ahead and ask. We're an open book. We don't hide anything. So go ahead and ask. But that aside, if you don't want to ask those questions, we could talk about the whiskey at hand. What are we thinking about this whiskey? I see Big Sherry from Anna and Adam.
It's very chewy in a
Just-
good way.
Will you also
Chewy.
will you also still be selecting in the previous way where you would go to places, or are you limited to just it's hard to say just when it's 18,000, but limited to what's there?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. So We have full freedom to bring in new distilleries, even if our sister company, Scotch Malt Whiskies. So that's another thing, right? Artisanal Spirits Company owns Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, owns Single Cask Nation, and owns a third brand called J.G. Thompson, which is a blended malt brand. So we're sister companies underneath the Artisanal Spirits banner. So if we have a relationship that we're starting with, Distillery A or Distillery B, and Scotch Malt Whiskey Society is not interested in that, it's totally fine. We can still work with them. We can still bring them in. And we have a budget and a process for bringing on new collaborations. So yeah, we still have that freedom. We also have the freedom if, there's existing broker relationships and that broker says, hey, I've got a parcel of Springbank from 1953 and it's as cheap as chips. That's never going to happen, by the way. We have the budget to say, yeah, guys, they're looking to sell this to us. We're interested. We want to buy this. And it's no questions asked. If we feel that's the way the business needs to go and we feel that we can bottle it and sell it, the company is fully behind us on that. Yeah, they're giving us full reign. It was interesting. The comment to us was, yes, of course, we're interested in Single Cask Nation, but we invest in people and we believe in what you, Joshua and Jason and Jess have done with Single Cask Nation. So we want you to continue doing what you're doing. And that was sort of the general sense of the conversation there.
It really sounds like the best of both worlds. It's pretty awesome.
It is awesome because I mean, if I'm being very honest, it was getting to dire times. You can't be an independent bottling company if you run low on things to bottle. So, it was in a sense, and I don't want to be too hyperbolic here, but it felt like a bit of a life raft for us. And it allowed me to quit my day job. I now only have one full-time job, and that's Single Cask Nation. That's kind of a nice thing. All right. What else do we think about this whiskey? Do we agree that this is a fetishist whiskey? Is it weird? Is it unusual? Do we just love it?
I love it. It is absolutely weird. I get like mushrooms with cough syrup or something like weird like that.
Mm.
But I love it. And I actually had tasted another bottle from you guys from a while ago, 26-year-old finishing ex-Caroni rum, which is one of the best things I've tried.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and I would argue between the 26-year-old and this 11-year-old, there is that connective tissue. Like they both taste of a thrusk to me. And and that and that's sort of what we go after, even when we bottle something that has this amount of sherry on it. And I think, I agree with Anna and Adam that there is a lot of sherry that's sitting on this spirit, but it's not weighing it down. It's kind of framing that sort of a thrust funkiness.
Do you have a guess on what type of sherry? Because this is my preferred sherry, but I haven't done enough.
Yeah, so this is Oloroso sherry.
Oh, this is
And I'm near positive. I'd have to check the paperwork. And actually, we may have done it last night, but I don't remember. There was drinking involved, so you tend to forget things. But I think that it was American oak sherry. So, one of the nice things about our new owner is that there's a lot of information that comes with each and every cask, including if it is a finished whiskey, the origin cask and then the finishing cask, and it'll quite often say if it's Oloroso PX Amontillado sherry, insert sherry type here, it will say American oak, Spanish oak, European oak, French oak, and so on. So we get a lot of information, and if memory serves, this one was an American oak sherry cask.
How much does the different oak type factor in after it's already given so much to the sherry and now it's refilled?
We find it to be huge, right? So when you look at American oak versus Spanish oak, and these are two, really opposite ends of the spectrum. Both oak, but American oak is a very hard wood. It's with very tight pores, and Spanish oak is a much softer wood and it's quite a bit more porous. And so Spanish oak allows spirit to really dig in and take in some of those deeper flavors. So it lets the sherry itself dig into the wood, and then the spirit thereafter digs in. Where American oak has just a tougher time. So you get different flavors, lighter flavors from the American oak sherry cask, deeper, heavier flavors from the Spanish oak. So actually, not with the Ben Nevis so much, but once we get to the Aberfeldy and Glen Murray, that's when you're really going to see the differences, because both of those were Spanish oak Oloroso. So you'll get a good understanding of that. And I think the last thing that I'll say about the oak types when it comes to sherry, and I remember years ago, there was what was his name? Jerry Tosh. There was a guy by the name of Jerry Tosh who was the global brand ambassador for Highland Park. And when they talked about constructing their 12-year-old, 18-year-old, 21, 25, 30-year-old, and so on, they weren't talking so much about the sherry cask that they use from the perspective of the sherry that was once in there. They talked about it from the perspective of accessing Spanish oak and European oak. It was the only way for them to access those types of wood to get the flavors from the oak that they're looking for. Yes, sherry's a part of it, but the target was that oak and what the oak could do to the spirit. So I always found that kind of fascinating. And it wasn't until, years later when Jason and I started having our different experiences of sherry, cask matured whiskey from the different types of oak that it was like a light bulb went on. Like we finally got it, finally made sense. There you go. All right. Oh, I like this. It reminds me a bit of Kregeliki, but deeper. Oh, that's great. Good on you, Rita. I like that connection to Kregeliki, which is also that sort of heavier, funkier style
Right.
of whiskey.
Yeah, it's like almost a Craigellachie and Glenallachie came together.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, nice. All right. Any other questions on this one? Am I going too fast? Am I chattering too much? Am I making sense?
You're making perfect sense.
Okay, good.
Yeah, this is great. We all like the nerdy stuff, so
Okay.
you know what we're like.
Yes, I do. All right. Are we ready for whiskey number 3? I don't want to go too fast here. Yeah, okay. I see hearts. When I say you're ready for the next whiskey and I see hearts, I'm like, okay, got it. Move on, Hatton. All right. So now we're on to the Ben Nevis. This is oh, wait a second. Can I do this really quickly? Please pour the Ben Nevis. But I want to read the truncated tasting note that we have on our Thrusk label that the US government approved. I just want to point this out. We put this label in front of government officials. They read it, they scrutinized it, and they said, A-OK. Tasting notes. A Thrusk is often spoken about in hushed tones as the distillery reserved for those whiskey geeks with something of a specialist leaning. We can't all attend furry conventions, but we can all take delight in the special nature of a good Thrusk. Those are your tax dollars at work, everybody. I
I'm
just want
sorry.
to point that out.
The TTB was okay with that?
We totally took a chance on Wild Romance and they said, boom, go ahead. Yes.
Amazing.
They probably didn't know what a furry convention was.
They probably didn't. Either that or someone who attends furry conventions is on the TTP and they're like, yes, approve now, immediately. Like they felt seen. I think that's what it was.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I did get a giggle out of reading the bottle. It was pretty awesome.
All right.
As,
On to
as
a bit.
somebody who had stayed at a hotel in Paris while there was a furry convention at that same hotel, I'm just imagining stuff that I really don't want to imagine. And no, we were not at the furry convention. It just happened.
You weren't leading it. Okay.
Yeah, no. It was interesting, and the elevators. How could I say? Could you use some deodorant?
What are the master classes like at furry conventions? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Food for thought, guys. Food for thought. All right, we're going to continue with what I would argue is still sort of a specialist whiskey. I would argue Ben Nevis is kind of a specialist whiskey, but it's gained quite a bit of popularity over the past sort of 5, 6, 7 years or so. A lot of independent bottlers got batches of Ben Nevis from 1996, all remarkable liquid, and that sort of opened our eyes to other vintages that started becoming available. And it's just been so nice to see this sort of consistent funky monkey quality of Ben Nevis. So this one's an 11-year-old. 8 years in bourbon, 3 years in first fill Oloroso Hogshead. You're looking at 56.2% alcohol. You know what? You've got 140-ish distilleries in Scotland, and up until about 6 years ago, 139 of them were using distiller's yeast, and Ben Nevis was using a brewer's yeast. Which completely changed their fermentation, their wash, and affected their spirit style, right? I mean, think of our own whiskeys here in the U.S. and like Four Roses that have different yeasts to create different flavors, right? Think of our good friends at Westland Distillery with their Belgian yeast. Is it still Jean-Claude Van Damme? Is that someone? What was it? Matt Hoffman one time told me it's called like Jean-Claude Van Damme or something.
Oh my gosh. It's no, it's a fermentus or a T
Oh,
cell.
that's so. That must have been like the internal kind of.
Yeah, I will ask Tyler and let you
Okay.
know.
Oh, I've been telling everybody it's just called Jean-Claude Van Damme. But anyway, it makes your whiskey damn good. So there you go. Damn's in there somewhere. So you've got a distillery that up until 6 years ago is using a brewer's yeast, which I would argue lends to this sort of funkier, earthier style of whiskey. Yes, there is sherry influence going on here. Yes, there's a bit of struck match. Like we're not gonna shy away from the fact that there's a bit of sulfur going on here. And we actually quite like that because it's a part and parcel of the overall experience, right? I mean, there's certain whiskeys that just smell of pure farts and you never want to smell them or taste them. But then you taste these that struck match becomes earthiness, right? It becomes an earthen floor that's complemented then by the more coastal style of the Ben Nevis spirit and some of the sweetness from the sherry cask. It's rich. It's quite salty. Bit of red fruits going on. What's this? Agree with the doughy malty grain. Yeah, leaning towards raisins. I like that. Yeah, nice. A cheesy note. Who said that? I like
I
that.
started it.
I actually
Yeah,
just got a hint of but in a good way, like BO.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I bought a single cask of Old Pulteney back in 2009, 2010, and it had this note of smelly socks, and it was awesome. It was so good. It complemented the whiskey so well, but it just reeked of like someone needs to clean their feet,
So I
but
just
in a good way.
washed my running shoes recently, and this is the note I'm getting. The fabric on the running shoe.
It's great. Like in what other setting can that be a good thing? That's why I love whiskey.
Yeah, I was telling Anna, I've been dabbling with sourdough for a while, and when she said cheesy note, that's kind of what I got out of it too. It's that almost like it attracted something wild, yeasty
Mm.
in as part of their mash, and it's got that funk on it, but it's
Mhm.
also almost but not quite salted caramel on roasted peaches
Oh,
because it's
I
got
don't know if I've ever done that combination.
yeah, it's not the first thing you would think of, but it actually works surprisingly well. But it's that salinity is there, and I'm sure the caramel I'm getting is actually the sherry note.
Mm.
It's coming to me, it's coming across like a caramel, but the peach note kind of underneath it. It's really quite interesting. Like,
Oh, that's great.
yeah, really, really nice long finish too.
I like this note from Alana and Henrik that this would go well with an oatmeal raisin cookie. That's great. I could totally see that. So yeah, so this is now I think the fifth Ben Nevis that we've bottled. We did a few from 1996. We did one from 2012, and then this one from 2013. And we do have in our warehouse some of the Ben Nevis that has been distilled from a wash that used distiller's yeast rather than brewer's yeast. So we haven't tasted any of that liquid to see how it's been affected by the change in yeast, but it's something that we're going to start looking at starting next year, maybe the year after, just to see how that's tracking. And so, it'll be a nice story to tell. It's kind of I think about this every once in a while, probably too much, right? As whiskey geeks, and if you're really whiskey geeky about certain distilleries, and you think like they're like I'll use Bowmore as a perfect example, right? Where you say, oh, Bowmore from the 60s tastes this way, Bowmore from the 70s tastes that way, the 80s surely has its flavor characteristics, that FWP style, and so on. And there were reasons for the changes in the distillate style that we're not going to go into tonight. But here we are in a modern day example of a distillery going through a production change that we can track in real time, like right now. We don't have to go back in time to 60s, 70s, and 80s, and so on. So if you're as dorky and as interested in it as I am, please keep an eye out on Ben Nevis distillate from 2018 and beyond, and compare it to the 2017 and before, and see what it does.
Joshua, I have an answer for you.
Ooh.
Sorry to derail. Tyler responded, yes, it was internally called Jean-Claude Van Damme, and that was due to the French-Belgium nature of its origin, but it is in fact Saf T58, which is way less fun than calling it Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, can we just continue calling it Jean-Claude Van Damme?
Sure, why not? Do it.
Okay. Good. Thank you, and thanks to Tyler. That's awesome. I love real-time answers. This is great. It's happening now. It's happening now.
You know that's my specialty.
I know it is. You're so good at that. All right. Are we ready to move on? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Oh, this is the midway point. We're going to our Aberfeldy 10-year-old. And this is what I want you all to keep in mind. Keep in mind we're going from American oak sherry now to Spanish oak sherry with this Aberfeldy. So really pay attention to some of these deeper notes coming through. And just to give you an idea, right? For the Ben Nevis, it was 8 years bourbon, 3 years sherry. For the Aberfeldy, it's 7 years bourbon, 3 years sherry. So you're looking at the same amount of time for treatment on the liquid. I don't know if it's coming through at all, but this darker one is the Aberfeldy. This lighter one is your Ben Nevis, right? So Spanish oak typically imparts, perfect, Jane. Typically imparts much darker color because that liquid can really penetrate into the oak and not just pull out the flavor, but also pull out some of that extra color. So it just comes across visually a bit more striking because of that. This is now the second Aberfeldy we bottled. The first Aberfeldy we did was a 28-year-old that we bottled for export markets, not for the US. And it was refill or second fill or refill bourbon. And what we loved about that Aberfeldy was it highlighted the number one thing we love about Aberfeldy is it has this floral characteristic to it. And in that 28-year-old, it was like drinking high octane chamomile tea. Like it was just remarkable. It was pretty, not that high octane. It was like 44% alcohol or something like that. It was a low ABV, but anyway, right? It was just that chamomile tea delivery. And so when we nosed in this one and tasted this one, we wanted to make sure that the Aberfeldy florality was still in there, as well as there's this other note in there as well, which is ripe apricots, and that is a sort of keystone to the Aberfeldy character. Look at that Egyptian chamomile, nice, Joe. If you're Joe, there's two guys there. One of you are named Joe. He's Joe. All right.
Bald man is Joe.
Bald man is Joe, and who's the other guy?
That man's Trent.
Trent. Hi, Trent.
Hey, Joshua. Or Isidore, whichever you prefer.
Usador.
Sorry.
We're new to that.
Man, yeah, this one was for us, this is comfort whiskey. This is bundle up, hang out by a fire, listen to the wood crackling behind you. Maybe you're playing some games with your partner or whatever, but this is just like you've had a shit day at work and you need comfort. That's what this Aberfeldy is, at least for me. Though I haven't had too many shit days at work. Work's been pretty good lately, guys. Incredibly dense, rich, viscous. You're looking at 57.8% alcohol, which I don't think you would get given how viscous it is. Yeah. Oh, I love the note on this as well. Tasting notes. Buy it in August, which is funny. We released it in September, but that's between us. So we'll say September. Buy it in September. Sample it upon receipt. Then stow away half a dozen bottles for the festive season. This is one for sharing around a fire. It's a decadent holiday whiskey. Does anybody here Aberfeldy drinkers just generally? Just their own distillate? Yeah, Jane, nice. Yeah, I really think it's a distillery that's worth investigating, not just through us and maybe other independent bottlers, but their own distillate. It really shines. Stephanie McLeod is the master blender there, and the work she's done with that spirit, I think has been really great. They've got standard age stated whiskeys, and then they will release single casks as well. So if you dig this, please purchase it. Feed my children. We all thank you. But also check out their own bottlings, because I think that it's a distillery that's too often overlooked and unfairly so. You know, as we've been going on with these, it's funny, there's 2 bourbon cask whiskeys here and then 5 sherry cask whiskeys here. And all 5 sherry cask whiskeys here are finished, right? It's a certain amount of time in bourbon, a certain amount of time in sherry. And typically when we look at casks that are, you know, whiskey that's been finished, we like to look at them with a minimum of 2 years in that finishing wood. When we get to the Glenmurray, that's a 5-year finish. I mean, really, in the end, we'd call that a double maturation. Like to us, in the end, a good whiskey is a good whiskey is a good whiskey. But we also understand that, you know, people scrutinize the details and they say, well, that whiskey was finished in another cask. It was probably not so good. Well, the answer to that is yes, it probably was not that great a whiskey, and therefore they put it in a cask to maybe fix something, or maybe it was, you know, maybe it was a bit more unidimensional and they just wanted to add more flavor, more depth through the whiskey. So, you know, whether it's us, whether it's another bottler or distilleries themselves, like if you do this, if this is a leaning of yours where you would shy away from the potential of a finish, like please don't. If you've been enjoying these, this just goes to show that finishing is not a naughty thing. Finishing can be an absolutely wonderful thing to the whiskeys. And I would argue, because I said yes to these casks, that all 5 of them are well worth bottling and well worth opening and sharing and drinking. So sorry, I'll get off my soapbox there. I apologize.
Is any of those a seasoned sherry or the old hold sherry for a while?
Very good question. So these will be seasoned casks, but we do have in our warehouse a number of what we call bodega casks. And so the bodega casks that we have, these are casks that have been in the sherry Solera system for decades, right? Just so if you are you familiar with the Solera? Is everybody familiar with the Solera system of sherry maturation? Yeah, everybody's got that? Cool. So these bodega casks will often stay within that sherry Solera system for decades, and then they'll sell them on to those in the whiskey industry who are looking for them. And if I'm being very, very honest, 9 times out of 10, the bodega casks, like the old school vintage sherry casks, are not doing the spirit any favors, at least in the experiences that we had in the casks that are in our warehouse. The ones that we've been leaning more towards are what we're tasting here, which they're seasoned casks rather than vintage casks. And to again, back to transparency, we get all of our seasoned sherry casks from Miguel Martin, which, you know, that's who Kilhoman, Glenfarclas, you know, the Edrington Group and a number of others get their sherry casks from. So it's top quality wood, top quality sherry going in there to season the wood. So I think that kind of outshines the off chance that a vintage sherry cask can make a whiskey work, right? You just have a consistently good wood in these seasoned casks. Does that answer your question?
Sure. Sure.
Okay, cool. Oh, I like this. Jane's getting a bit of minerality on the back end of this.
Yeah, it was kind of a surprise because I kept finding like I was getting something, but the finish is so long, I almost missed it. And then it was like it's kind of like licking a rock right towards the end.
Right towards the end, yeah.
Just a little
Yeah,
tiny bit.
it's funny. I wrote that off as just like a pleasing drawing quality. It wasn't even thinking about the flavor attached to that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I really it's something I kind of get a kick out of because some of their stuff is so floral, you don't really get that out of it.
Yeah.
Every once in a while you'll get something that it just has this note and it's what the hell is that? And that was what it made me think. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is that minerality that I associate with like some kind of stone,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
When I get the salty and the mineral, I get like a meaty note to it, like not like, not to be graphic, almost like the bloody aftertaste, which I really enjoy. Not to
Oh,
be
wow.
like
That's wild. Yeah.
like having your steaks blue.
right, like just and not just like the hint of it, not like
Yeah.
really done, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As someone who's been a vegetarian for 36 years, I'm trying to think of these notes and it's not working for me.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
have
that's hard to my mom's vegan and trying to explain that to her would be impossible. So I totally
Trying to think what you would use as a vegan or vegetarian reference, and it's more like if you had a
Mhm.
field roast with a preponderance of lentils in it.
Okay.
I was gonna say
Iron. Oh,
like a lentil.
Yeah, that iron.
Yeah,
iron. Yeah, Rita nailed it there. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm. Oh, you bite your cheek down again. That's true. That's so spot on. Oh man. Yeah, I'm so happy with this one. So we've got a fair amount of Aberfeldy in our warehouses, and so while this was our second one, it definitely isn't our last. We bottled a couple different bourbon cask ones, so we'll have a bourbon cask, straight bourbon cask Aberfeldy coming to the U.S. Another one for our UK, European, and Asian markets as well. Um, it's Jason and I and Jess, all three of us, we have certain distilleries that we've got passions for and every once in a while we take time to start, screaming from the rooftops about them. Jason's current one is Balmenic. You're going to hear him blather on about Balmenic, whether you're in a tasting with him or on the podcast. Like, dude will not shut up about it. Rightfully so. It's good liquid. But Aberfeldy and Manic have been my two that I'm really starting to lean into, and Altabane or Altabania, however you want to pronounce it, is another one that I'm starting to look at as well. So you're going to hear us championing whiskey from distilleries that none of us can pronounce, but all of us can enjoy.
You guys bottled a Dally Wayne, and I've been chasing independent bottles of Dally Wayne, and that's a weird one that you guys got me onto that I love.
Was that was it a more recent one, like a deep sherry cask one?
No, it was a ex-bourbon barrel, probably, I want to say it was like 5 years ago. Is that the one?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
I know the exact one you're talking about.
Very
Tell
like,
you in. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, very banana, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so Daluane has four different spirit types that they run. And it's really just sort of an adjustment, as I understand it. It's an adjustment in their fermentation times and their distillation speeds and how they fill their stills as well. And they have four very simple code names for them: fruity, grassy, heavy, and then there's a fourth one that I can't remember off the top of my head. And so, we were buying all of our casks of Daluane directly from Diageo. And when you buy from Diageo, this is what you can tell them. you can request spirit between 3 and 12 years old. You can request a bourbon cask or a sherry cask, first fill or refill. And Diageo's nomenclature about the filling of a cask is different from everyone else. I think most people in the industry, and Anna, I'd love to hear from you about what Westland does, right? Most producers in the industry say, okay, the first time you use a cask, like if you're a malt whiskey producer and you're using a bourbon cask for the first time, that's first fill. The second time you use it, it's second fill. And the third time and thereafter, it's refill. But Diageo go first fill and then refill. They don't do second fill. Everything second use and after is refill. So when you're requesting whiskey from them and you say refill, it could be anywhere from second, third, fourth, fifth use. And so there's that issue that we dealt with, not knowing. And then to this specific case of Daluane, you never knew what spirit type you were getting, whether it's the grassy, fruity, heavy, or the fourth one. You just sort of get what you get and you don't get upset. Anna, what was your nomenclature at Westland?
Yeah, we use first fill, second fill, specifically if it's Oloroso. I'm not actually sure about the bourbon, and then refill after that, but we also don't have a ton that's after that yet either.
Yeah. Good point.
But first fill and second fill for sure on sherries. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you wouldn't think of using the term refill for a second fill, right? It doesn't seem to make sense, does it? Doesn't to me. Yeah. All right. So we've discussed Aberfeldy, and then we discussed in greater lengths Daluane, which was a wonderful little side thing. I want to discuss Glenmurray, because aside from one other whiskey, which I don't want to tell you, this Glenmurray might be my favorite of the evening because it's doing things that I've never experienced in any other Glenmurray, with the exception of a cask that we may be releasing next year. It's much older and it's in a different type of wood. So this one is a 13-year-old. It's been 8 years in bourbon, 5 years in Spanish oak Oloroso. You're looking at 59.9% alcohol on this one. And this is what I want you to do. Give this one a nose, and Jason, you'll remember this one from last night. But give this one a nose, and if you've ever had weeded bourbon from the old Stitzel Weller days, like Pappy Van Winkle, say maybe 2015 and before, and you've had that, nose this whiskey and think about that. It smells like we took an old Stitzel Weller weeded bourbon and married it with Glenmurray and put it into a sherry cask. Right? It's got that just bright, high, sweet note going on. There you go. Rita was just going to say it's reminiscent of bourbon. Yeah, we tasted this cask for the first time blind, and I actually thought it was, I mean, I knew it was Scotch whiskey, so I wasn't going to go down the route of a weeder or anything, but I really thought that it was a Glenfarclas or a Tamdhu or something that, was a distillery well known for its sherry casks with a really heavy presence to it. And I was blown away by it. And then I was blown away even more to know that it was Glenmurray, because I'd never tasted a Glenmurray like this. It's doing all the things I want Glenmurray to be doing, and then some. it's got these like floral quality. There's potpourri. There's fruit cake going on. There's a bit of rum raisin, tiramisu, sticky toffee pudding if you've ever had it before. It's just all the richness, all the heaviness.
I like the tiramisu you mentioned because of the creaminess. It has a little bit of a creamy texture too.
Yeah. Yep. And that's I'm really glad, Rita, what you said about the texture, and I may have mentioned this before, but you know, as independent bottlers who are in the habit of bottling whiskey, rum, mezcal, brandy, you know, cognac, from a number of different producers across a number of different countries, we don't have a flavor profile to say this is what we do, right? We don't have, we're not referring with a quarter cask, 10-year-old, 15-year-old, and so on to say this is consistently what we look like. But what we do have is our pursuit of texture. We always want our whiskeys to have that rich viscosity going on. So I'm glad you got that creaminess in this, Rita.
A lot of dry fruit, like apricot and raisin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but with like, I like the raisin note, but for me, it's if you did raisinettes, but with dark chocolate rather than milk chocolate, it's much more, it's more bitter than it is sweet on the chocolatey aspect of it, for me at least.
I'm also getting a little bit of dried strawberry.
Oh, I like that note.
It's, you know, it's like you think of the red fruits that come out with the sherry, but it's not like the dark red fruits. It's a light one. And it kind of, it's like, I don't know, it's really close to the front of the palate. So it kind of goes away pretty quickly, but it's really super light, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, you know, it kind of finishes like the leather chair in your grandpa's library.
I love that.
This is
I,
awesome. I love
uh, thanks so much. Yeah, we're really proud of these. Like, again, like, yes, we've been doing this for 13 going on 14 years, and now we have this, you know, large company that's backing us from a liquid perspective, from like, you know, just a money perspective, allowing us to do the number of things that we want to do, but we maintain this we maintain that every cask we bottle is something that we would want to open for ourselves and share with other people, that it would be a bottle of whiskey that we would open our own wallets for. And it's been challenging is not the word. It's been interesting to feel as if we're challenged. You know, we released 82 casks this year. Last year, I think it was closer to 28 or 30, somewhere around that there. And given that jump in number of casks that we've bottled, we could so easily say, oof, we've got a budget we need to hit. Look at these goddamn cats. Jesus Christ. Everybody, quick, look at these calico beauties.
I'm posing a question to the group. They're named after Scottish whiskey islands.
Aaron and Isla.
Isla's this one. The left one is
Tobermory.
Jura.
Jura, look at that.
Oh, yes, more cats.
Oh, more cats. Oh, who's that? Who's that little ginger baby?
So that's Marshall, and his sister Lily is hidden away. And those of you that knows pop culture knows what we were watching when we got these two. So if you ever saw the show How I Met Your Mother,
that's awesome.
And it's funny when we take them to the vet, you can instantly see when they call them both. You can instantly see who saw the show and who did not.
Right. Yep. really quickly, because we're on the topic of cats' names, I have to go here. I used to have a cat named Eswipe, which is spelled asswipe with an exente goo. And it's from an old SNL skit with Nicolas Cage, and they're trying to like it's him and his wife, and they're about to have a baby, and they're trying to like figure out, what do we call him? Like, should we call him Bart? No, Bart rhymes with fart. Should we call him Rick? No, Rick rhymes with dick. And right, and it's just going on, and then there's a ring at the door, and it's Rob Schneider, and he's like a UPS delivery guy, and he says, "Yeah, I've got a package here for Mr. Asswipe." It's a sweep. And so anyway, when we had our boy Sweepe, who is also a ginger, by the way, and we take him to the vet, and the vet has to call us to let us know he's ready. They would say, yeah, Mr. Hatton, your cat, whose name is and I pause, and I let them suffer for a little bit. And I say, it's pronounced a Sweepe. He's ready for pickup. Okay, great, thanks. I'll pick him up.
Please tell me, as a ginger cat, he had his days with the one collective brain cell and then other days without.
Yep.
I think all of his days were one collective brain cell. He was a mush. He was a lap kitty. He would sleep in the crook of my arm all night long, and he'd be on my lap all day if he could be. And he was just a little lovey-dovey, and
I mean that's why they're known as Velcro cats.
right? Yeah, exactly. Velcro cat. Perfect. Were we talking about whiskey at one point? I think we were talking about whiskey at one point.
Oh, that's right. That thing.
Yeah. Whiskey.
I totally
Yeah.
derailed. I'm sorry.
No. Please, we need these. We need these little. You take a break, right? I mean, we're 5 whiskeys in. I think that was a nice breaking point here. But yeah, so this Glen Murray, absolutely floored us. This was the second whiskey we tasted from the Artisanal Spirits Warehouse. And we actually tasted it just before we were acquired. And I think it was their way of showing us the quality of the stock that is sitting in their warehouse. Like and this year, I think we went through 90 samples 2 weeks ago, and I think another 150 to 200-ish samples over the past few weeks. And before the year's out, we'll have gone through 400 samples. And it used to be that our approval rate of a cask was 10%, 15%, something like that. And we're finding that our approval rate from the casks that are sitting in our current warehouses is closer to 50%, which is amazing. And the 50% we're saying no to, the majority of those are, that's simply not ready, or maybe it needs to go into another cask for finishing. There have been a few stinkers, and man, have they been stinkers, but they're really few and far between. There's always bad whiskey, but the good thing is there's more good whiskey than there is bad. So, and we're really good about taking internal notes as well, right? Our Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, who is our sister company, wants to know if we've said no to something, why we've said no to that, so they can, have an understanding of what our palates are like. We selected an MGP that we released in June, that they said no to, because they said, oh, it's weird, it's too smoky, it doesn't make sense. And we selected it because we said, why is an MGP bourbon smoky? That makes no sense. Also, it's delicious. Let's bottle it. Right. So it's, one of those other questions that comes up is, well, what happens if they want a cask and you want the same cask? Do you have a baby knife fight when that happens? Is it rock, paper, scissors? The fact of the matter is we're never really tasting the same stuff at the same time anyway. And there's 18,000 casks, so we just don't see that ever happening. But I am very good at rock, paper, scissors, so I think that we might win. All right. Are we ready for the penultimate whiskey? And to enter the world of peat? All right. We're going to go into our 8-year-old Williamson. Everybody knows what the Williamson is, yes? Oh,
It's a
is that
Lefroy. Is that true? Is that it? I was looking online. This is the first I've heard of
Yeah.
Williamson.
I am not allowed to tell you that this is 100% Lefroy, so I'm not going to tell you that this is 100% Lefroy.
I didn't hear anything. There was a cut in the internet.
But yes,
Okay, we could totally pause the recording so you could not tell us that.
I think I did tell you that it was that I.
Yeah,
How's this language
that was the
working?
thing. I've heard
Okay.
nothing.
Yeah, didn't hear anything. But I mean, what I love about their use of the word Williamson, which is sort of their trade name when they're trading whiskey to, you know, for other blends and things like that, is Williamson is the last name of Bessie Williamson, who is a distillery manager at this distillery at a time when there were no female distillery managers in Scotland, period. And what a lovely legacy to have, and what a lovely way to honor Bessie by naming their spirit after her. I just think that that is damn cool in an industry that still tends to be a bit sausage led. To have Williamson there, I think it's quite nice. Man. All right. So this is doing all the things that I want it to do. This is 8 years in refill, right? Yes. Refill bourbon. So the wood steps back to make way for fruity, yet still flinty, still a bit minerally spirit from this Isla distillery and all of its beauty. It just transports me back to my first time being at this distillery and going through the warehouses, and then you get to the end of the warehouse tour and there are 2 or 3 casks that are laid out, and you can sort of bottle your own 200 milliliter bottle from these casks. And it's right, I think this is those times when whiskey is so magical that it's not about flavor, and it's not necessarily about taking you from point A to point B, right, from being sober to kind of a happy tipsy place, but sort of taking you back to good times in your life. And that's what this one does. It just takes me back to my first time there, which was my first time on Isla, which was August 2011, so 13 years ago now. And you know, when I was 37 years old, and I was a young man at the time. So yeah, lots of good memories around that. What do we think of this one?
Really,
Delicious.
it's really much more approachable to me than a regular Lefroy.
Okay.
It doesn't have quite the medicinal note. It's more that brininess that's in there, and the smoke is a little, I feel like, softer. Maybe it's all the other drams ahead of time, but to me,
Mhm.
it's really lovely.
Yeah, it is. I'm a peat head, but this is really nice, and I'm with Anna on this. This is very approachable peat. This is kind of like, hey, how you doing? Hey, enjoy a little sip, right? It's not
Yeah,
the punch in your face peat. This is
yeah,
very nice.
yeah. Oh, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, Jane, go ahead.
Oh no, that's okay. I was just gonna say I put it in the chat, but the first sip does not make a liar out of the nose.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, that first scent it's so strongly aromatic and all the best aspects of a campfire that is not blowing smoke in your face.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it also has that salinity and like it's more of the vegetal peat, not the medicinal peat. So it's like all the grasses and this,
Mhm.
that, and the other thing. And I actually might actually get my sister to try this one. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
And is
she thinks
she,
peat is hideous. So I'm like, okay, she might actually try this one for me. So I'm like, but this is, I mean, it's stunning. It's so modulated. It's not gonna smack you upside the head, but it's also not something that you could ignore. It's just
yeah.
bliss.
Oh, I love that.
It's
Oh, thank you
yeah.
so much. Yeah, it's funny as Henrik, as you were talking, the finish was hitting me after my last sip, and I got this dankness going on. Um, that for anybody who might dabble in the devil's lettuce, it has a little bit of that hempiness going on, just on the finish, just that light skunk going on, which
I
not
think that,
suggesting anybody does,
yeah,
but here we are.
but after I've had the first sip and I smelled it again, I kind of, yeah, I got that little, I could see that hempy even on the
Yeah,
nose, and on the finish, I get something too, a little dustiness, but this is, yeah, this is great.
that's awesome. Oh, thank you so much.
I
Really
I
excited to hear that.
I hope you still have some of these in stock. That's
We
all I'm
do.
gonna
So
say.
everything that we're tasting, we have in stock. And again, it's somewhere in the chat here. Might be worth, I'll pop it in again, but VTS 2024, all caps with the VTS, will get you 10% off your entire order. And that also goes for anything on our website, not just the 7 whiskeys we're tasting tonight. So if between now and midnight your time you see some others that are interesting and you want to add that in too, you'll get the 10% on those as well, not just what we're tasting.
You were talking about the devil's lettuce and hemp and everything, and all I could think of is I had a friend who had a boat at one point down in the marina here, and it reminds me of those old giant hemp ropes that are just totally crusted with seawater.
Yep, yep.
That smell, that
Boat ropes. Yeah, for
boat rope,
sure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, boat ropes. That's great. That's just a classic island note for me. And I love it. I love when other people get that and you can describe it. Some people know it and some people don't. My dad used to live on a sailboat, not a big one. We don't have that much money, but he lived on a small little sailboat because he just wanted to live the sea life for a little while. And going to visit him and helping him with all that stuff, you get it.
Jane, you're good. Every time you give a note, I'm always like, yeah, that's what I'm trying to look for.
yeah, we've a few people that are really good at
This ain't Jane's first rodeo.
yeah. I learned on wine, so I've got tasting notes in my brain.
That's great. Do you find, Jane, just really quickly, because I don't want this to end too soon. Do you find that how you approach wine and discover those notes is the same way you approach whiskey and discover notes, or is it a different approach for you?
Honestly, I approach them kind of the same way, but
Mhm.
because the alcohol levels are so disparate, because most wines are like 13, 14%,
Yeah.
it's a little harder for me to find the notes in whiskey because I
Oh,
get such a
interesting.
huge alcohol bloom to start with. So I've spent, what have we been doing this for 4 years? So I've spent the last 4 years kind of learning how to taste a whiskey and find the note despite the alcohol.
Mm,
So I find it interesting now that I'm actually getting better at it. When I first started doing this, I'm like, I can't taste anything. What are you guys talking about? And now it's like, oh, look, there's this weird little stone like at the
yeah,
end of it,
yeah.
or boat ropes.
Huh.
I mean, come on, who pulls out boat ropes?
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really been tough because it's such a different way of tasting. The principles are the same. I mean, all of the stuff, they talk about terroir and wine, and there's terroir in whiskey. It's just harder to find it sometimes.
it's funny. Your experience has been the exact opposite of mine,
Mhm.
where I find with that extra alcohol, flavors are coming at me left, right, and center, and I need to slow down, pause, concentrate, focus here, focus there, take it all in. And with wine, I struggle to find those notes. And I often wondered if it was because of the lower alcohol delivering, not delivering the flavors in the speed that whiskey did, but it could just be haven't tried hard enough. I don't know. So that's why I ask.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think it's the same practice coming from
Mhm.
opposite ends of the spectrum. So
Yeah.
somewhere in the middle, you can make the two mesh and it actually makes more sense.
Okay.
I feel like I probably have only scratched the surface, but I'm fascinated by the different things that you can get out of something because I love listening to the tasting notes that everybody else comes out with. It's just super cool.
Jane, do you go through the Court of Sommelier's grid when you are looking at whiskey as well, or is it a different way of viewing whiskey when you taste it?
I haven't actually looked at the SOM chart when I'm doing whiskey.
Okay.
I did a tasting class with a SOM who was a guy who was just about to take his test again. And I kept pulling out notes that nobody else in the class was getting. And he kept throwing weirder and weirder stuff at me. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not like some savant that can tell you what vineyard and what year and oh, that's from like the back 40. Yeah, I'm not that good. But I did find weird notes and things. And there's a couple of people in our group that are normally around that are on the line of super tasters that find like the weirdest things, and like Qua can come up with notes. Jordan pulls up notes, Lori pulls up notes. There's just all these different things. So I think it's something you can use as a guideline,
Mm.
but it's like anything, it's a guideline. It doesn't mean that you have to look for it, but I think we're also suggestible. So as soon as somebody says something, you're like, oh yeah, I taste that too. So I've tried very hard not to be suggestible when I'm tasting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
All right. Speaking of fascinating, can we pour the final dram, which I mentioned that I thought the Glen Murray might have been my favorite, but this Kalila reminds me, if there's anybody in here who's had our Port Charlotte 14-year-old, it reminds me a bit of the naughtiness of that Port Charlotte 14-year-old. This one's a bit naughty. This one isn't watching its mouth. It's being very fresh with its language. It's a 14-year-old Kalila that, yes, was finished in sherry. You're looking at 11 years in bourbon, a refill bourbon Hagi, and then 3 years in first fill Spanish oak Oloroso. And this one is just full on wackiness, funk, beauty. I'm not going to give tasting notes. I agree with you, Jane. Let's not lead the witness from a tasting note perspective. I just want to prepare you because this is doing right back to what I was saying when I'm tasting whiskey versus wine, and I talk about the speed at which flavors are coming at me with whiskey. This Kalila is just like an onslaught of flavors. And sometimes with whiskeys, you find those flavors are kind of balled up and you need to sit with it and let the flavors build. And that ball is more like an onion that sort of unfolds. And this is just like a machine gun just shooting flavors at you. And you can't dodge it because you don't want to dodge it.
Pretty spectacular.
We're looking at 55.5% alcohol on this one. Nice round, interesting number there. And yeah, right. So again, I don't normally read these label notes, but I think it really touches to what I'm saying here. It's an enigma! Exclamation point. A series of contrasting and often conflicting aromas and flavors have produced a Caol Ila unlike anything we've experienced before, and we cannot get enough of it. Oh man, Shevitz, I like this.
That is so nice. I could wear this as a perfume.
Right?
Before we get too far past this one, I'd like to invite everybody to come back on camera so we can take a group photo.
Ah, yes.
And thank you so much for being with us tonight and sharing all this fabulous information. So let's see if I can get my computer to do what I want it to do. Everybody smile at the camera, raise your glass. Cheers. Yeah, I think I got it. Check. Oh, everybody's eyes are open. That's so awesome.
Does
Okay,
anybody look like they've been dabbling in the devil's lettuce? Take a closer look. Never.
I don't think so, but I think we're safe. So
Okay.
anyway, this is really fascinating. It's peaty in a completely different way than the last one, but still not medicinal.
Nope. And it retains its Caol Ila quality, but the sherry cask is doing something to this Caol Ila that I haven't tasted in Caol Ila before.
See, and it doesn't work for me.
It doesn't work for you. Okay.
No.
All right. Fair enough. What's not working for you? And everybody, close your ears. Don't listen to Henrik. What's not working for you?
No. You know what? It would be boring if we all like the same whiskey.
That's true.
So I'm a firm believer in drink whatever you want, however you want. I think the sherry cask to me is just it. My brain can't really accept the fact that this is so nice and peated and yet sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a juxtaposition there, but I kind of like, I'm feeling happy in that juxtaposition. I'm finding solace in it, but you're not. It's just not working for you.
I mean,
yeah. Okay.
That just means I'm gonna get some of the other one, the Williamson, because that one was fantastic.
What's interesting to me is a lot of times when I get, especially like very sherried ones, it really hits like the front of my palate, like blows up right away, the front of the roof of my mouth, and then slowly goes. And it's interesting you use a phrase that sort of like comes at you quickly. What's interesting to me is that it goes to the middle and back of my palate very quickly, and then stays there. And I get almost some baking spice notes. So it reminds me, Old Elk does a wheat and rye. That's like their wheated whiskey and the rye combined.
Oh, nice.
So, and the wheat winds up being, for my palate, a carrier of the rye flavor. Like it's as if it's like just pouring it in you, and it just like comes quicker. And this to me, I don't know what it is. I don't have to share what it is, but it really like, it hits my palate very quickly. It doesn't hit in the front where I'm used to it hitting, and then just sort of stays there. And it's this really interesting, like, like almost like it's a slip and slide kind of just.
Yeah.
Really interesting effect.
And to be clear, you're enjoying that, or it's throwing you off and you need to spend time with it?
No, I'm enjoying it. I mean, I will say, everyone knows here I'm much more of a bourbon guy than a single malt guy. And for me with single malt, I'm always just looking for, give me something interesting, give me something different, give me something that's like
there you go.
If I do when we do these with a single distillery, my biggest problem is my palate gets very tired of the same taste 4,
Yep.
5, and 6 times. And what I enjoy about these, especially tastings of this sort of thing, is I know that's not going to happen because it's coming different. So I am definitely enjoying that it's different, that it's not like, this isn't, I don't have this. And there's nothing.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
reminds
Yeah.
me of this. So I'm definitely, enjoying it for that fact.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Cheers. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah.
Is Kulila using peat from the main isle, like Bruichladdich?
Right. Yeah. No. So Kalila is taking their peated malt from Port Ellen Maltings. So Port Ellen Maltings, you likely know, and I apologize if you know this already, but I'll just say this to everybody in case some of you don't know. Port Ellen Maltings produces peated malted barley. At one time, for most of the distilleries on the island of Isla, with the exception of Bruichladdich, and I think it was sort of on and off with Bunnahabhain. And then in 2023, they actually pulled back selling peated malted barley to any non-Diageo distillery because they were expecting to use a lot of that barley for Port Ellen when Port Ellen was going to get up and running, which it now is. So Port Ellen maltings, unless things have changed, that peated malted barley is only being used at Kalila, Lagavulin, and Port Ellen currently.
Speaking of Bunnahabhain, I took a gander on your website, and you have a Bunnahabhain coming out. But
Tomorrow. Yeah.
But that you're killing me here.
So good.
Extension for the discount.
Maybe. I don't know. Okay. You ask me these questions when the alcohol starts to hit me.
It's all part of our wicked plan.
Joshua, I have a non-whiskey related question I'd like to ask you.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you please explain why I hear that you do not enjoy a Tunnocks tea cake texture?
Fucking hell. Jess Rabbit Lomas.
Because it's my favorite Scottish treat, so defend yourself, sir.
You know what she did? Do you know what this woman did? So I'm in Scotland. We're in the town of Uddingston, where the Tunnocks Bakery is. The Tunnocks Bakery, who makes Tunnocks tea cakes and Tunnocks caramel and all these. And we go into the shop, and she said, "Ooh, you can get the Tunnocks tea cakes right from the source here." And we're in the shop, and so I quietly said to her, "I don't really like the texture of it." Just between her and I. He decides to bring in all of the workers in the bakery to let them know of this terrible transgression. She had to tell I felt like, I don't know what I felt like. I'm too tired and have too much whiskey for a more witty comment here. But she threw me under the bus. That's what I'm gonna say. And then she just started telling everybody she met. Did you hear what Joshua said about Tunnocks tea cakes? But yes, the texture's off. That mallow needs to have more pushback. It needs to be more dense. It's too soft. It's too light. Fuck those tea cakes. That's what I say, Anna.
Do you like s'mores?
I do like s'mores with a vegan marshmallow.
Okay, and to be fair, I'm not familiar with that texture, so I guess I can't crap on that too much. But she did text me immediately upon that happening to let me know. So anyway,
but a
thank you everyone for
s'mores mallow isn't as soft as the Tunnocks cake mallow.
well,
Like
once
the
it's
Tunnocks,
melty, it is though. I mean, it does still have a bit more elasticity to it.
has more. I mean, the Tunnocks tea cake is mallow is just a tiny step up from like fluff.
Well, yeah.
Anyhow, this is all going back to texture and single
Texture.
cast. It's about
Yes.
the texture. Joshua
about the
is the
texture.
texture expert, and the texture of the tea cake was not working.
It wasn't
I
working.
can't believe you're okay, we're gonna have a discussion about this later.
Adam. There we go.
I just segged it back to on topic. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Oh, so now we've got our poll going. I've submitted my answer. I hope everybody will submit theirs. This is lovely.
It's a tough one this time.
Not
I love
really.
that.
It was easy for me.
Yeah, well, you're easy there, Henrik. Now I don't get to vote because I'm hosting, so I'm
Yes,
sort of
you do.
thankful because no, I don't actually because
doesn't.
I'm hosting. But I was torn because there's 4 of them I would have to like decide between, and I'm like, no, I don't have to choose a favorite child. I'm so excited.
Tell us your 4
I don't want to.
after everybody vote.
Yeah, I'll tell you after.
If you'll excuse me, a self-indulgent 20-second story. So me and Trent, we live in Costa Mesa in California, and we met 3-4 years ago at a Single Cask Nation tasting down here in the backyard of
Some guy
a local whiskey clubs. They did a Single Cask Nation. Who was the representative from Single Cask
I have
Nation?
no idea.
Elijah, maybe?
Oh, Elijah Ammon, yeah.
Yeah. And we went to the tasting separately and started talking, and we realized we
Live 2 doors down from each other.
yeah. And I'm moving to Chicago soon, so this is probably our last tasting together. So
Ah,
But another full circle. Anna, you're with Westland.
Yes.
Our favorite whiskey of the night was a Single Cask Nation of Westland, and I've been chasing that high for a long time, buying Westland
yeah, money.
bottles, but I can't find it. I still love your stuff, but you know,
Oh yeah,
high,
of course.
I can't relive.
Yeah. Thank you.
So not to get sappy, but yeah, the whiskey is a vehicle to meet people, and
right?
that's what I'll end it
Pretty
at.
special that way. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, did everybody get a
All
chance
right.
to vote? I'm missing at least one person. I don't know who to side eye.
I voted.
It's all fair. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll then. Gonna take a guess at what the favorite was among the group?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
My guess is that the favorite within the group was either a Thrusk or Williamson.
And you would be so close. That's number 1 and number 2.
Get that! Holy
that.
crap.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would have been a single vote for Glen Moray because I liked that so much. But literally from the Aberfeldy to the Kealila, I liked all of them so close. I would have had a hard time trying to pick them. But
I love that someone.
Yeah. I mean, Ilana, I think, you know, was liking the Thrush as well. But I clicked Williamson 8 year as soon as the poll came up and hit submit. That was just no question about it.
I love that someone had, or maybe it was 2 people. I don't know how these numbers work. But that Telebarden was selected, right? I think that is just great, and I also think that that's not just the single cast that we selected because we selected it. I think Telebarden actually makes great liquid, and we need to go on a bit of a Telebarden discovery.
yeah. And in case anybody cares, there was 1 vote for Tullabarden, 3 for Okrosk, 1 for Ben Nevis, 2 for Aberfeldy, 4 for Williamson, and 2 for Kealila.
Okay. There you go.
Which I find really interesting because we don't always cross the entire gamut of the tasting. So it's kind of nice that almost everybody got some love. I mean, everybody would
Nice.
have if I could vote. So there we go.
Okay.
That's fair.
No, as I say, it would be boring if we all like the same
Yeah.
stuff. But Jason, did you do a tasting yesterday with these guys, or what?
Yep, there's a couple of us here that did a tasting last night with them, and I think that Joshua, that Aberfeldy moved up for me from last night. Like the Williamson last night, the Williamson was my thing, but for
Yeah.
whatever reason tonight it was the Aberfeldy that got me. The Williamson wasn't hitting me the same way it did last night, and maybe that's
Wow.
because it was my second experience with it.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a couple of us that were on a tasting last night with Joshua and Jason and had 5 of the 7 of these.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I'll be honest. I mean, sherry cask is not my go-to, but I did like the Aberfeldy. That was probably until we got to the Williamson. That was probably my favorite. Truth be told.
That's awesome. That's great. Thank you all so much. Are there any other questions before I go and turn into a pumpkin?
Thank
Yes,
you.
Jason.
This was my first event with you guys. This was a lot of fun and a lot of really good information, Josh. Thank you.
Oh, cheers. Yeah, pleasure, Rita. Good to meet you.
I think the first time
You're an excellent host, just really good at being curious and asking questions and following up, and you just did a phenomenal job.
I think the
Cheers.
first time we did a
Agree.
Cheers.
early pandemic
Thank
is like
you.
it was like five.
I got a question, just if you're not too tired, but apparently, like a lot of those, a few of them are very classic, but few of those are very, very different from. Is that something you look for, like when, like as the company right now, like more diverse, like character of the distillery?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when we bottle from, this distillery or that distillery, we want to bottle examples that we feel are the best of what that distillery can do on steroids, right? So like one of our first bottlings was a Glen Murray 12-year-old, and Glen Murray have a 12-year-old. But the single cask that we found was doing all the things that 12-year-old was doing, just like, full on, right? It was going to 11. And then sometimes we just, because we always want to change it up, we will bottle casks that are a bit off the beaten path. And not to shine too bright a light on Westland, but Banana's here, so I'm going to do it anyway. But I think Westland's a really good example of, collaborating and having a relationship with the distillery and being able to focus on different distillate types, whether it's Washington Pale Malt unpeated, heavily peated Scottish malt, five malt mash bill, and then, the differing cask types. Like, it allows us to show sides of a distillery that not everybody gets to see. And sometimes, and I think, maybe Westland isn't the best example in this case, because you do show so many sides of what you guys can do at the distillery. But, we like to show aspects of a distillery that take people off guard. Like, consistency is our number one enemy in this company. Like, we cannot repeat things. And if we do, then I think we're failing. So yeah, sometimes it's off the beaten path and sometimes it's really off the beaten path. But at all times, even if it's off the beaten path for this distillery or that, we want to make sure that the essence of that distillery character remains. Like, we never want that to be hidden. Jordan, you were saying something before?
I was just gonna say, I think the first time we did a tasting with you guys, it was like super in COVID, and it was like 5.5 hours. And it was
7.
yeah, it was like an amazing night and
Was it 7 hours?
It was
something
almost 7 hours.
something insane. And
It was ridiculous.
I think I got like a whistle pig that night, and then I bought the what is it, 24-year Heaven Hill pre-fire after that. And tonight's only been like an hour and a half, but it's a different time, and it's just really a pleasure to be able to do a tasting for each time and have it be just as good, different
Yeah.
for the time appropriate. I don't want to do
Yeah.
an hour tasting on a Wednesday when I have a court appearance in the morning. In COVID, I wanted to do that. It was fucking awesome. Here, like we went through it and you paced it well. Like you were worried about it. You did great, and it was really fun. And so I'll always do a tasting with you guys. It's always fun.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. All right. Well, if there are any other questions, and unless Jane, you've got something for me.
I can always come up with questions, but I know it's late
Okay.
for you, so I don't want to keep you up. I just want to mention to everybody that we have some angelic offerings coming up in December. We're doing a tasting on the 4th with Heaven Hill, on the 12th with Heaven's Door, and on the 19th with Angel's Envy. We didn't actually intend it to be a theme. It just kind of worked out that way. So things are, I believe they're on, at least Heaven's Door and Heaven's Hill are listed already. Angel's Envy, if it's not up yet, it will be when Vadim gets back. So feel free to come join us again. And Joshua, thank you so much. John actually was asking, is there a Stones
Stones of Stennes coming. So I think, yes, we selected another Stones of Stennes, but we also selected Highland Park that we can call Highland Park. Yes, I'm so excited about that. So,
awesome.
I mean, it was actually funny when we selected it. Jason had asked the question, he said, I know we can call it Highland Park, but we've done so much work, using Stones of Stennes, and people know that. Should we just stick with that? And I said, fuck no, we shouldn't stick with that. We could use Highland Park name. We haven't been able to use the Highland Park name for 13, 14 years. Let's do that. So there will be a Highland Park coming out in 2025.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real
I
quick,
bought so many bottles after that first tasting. It was embarrassing.
one more shorty for you. I know there was a particular distillery brought up last night that I know you mentioned, Log, that you're thinking about working with. Are there any of these other newer distilleries that you're looking at working with? I'm kind of particularly looking at one that's over my shoulder here called Loch Lee, to see if what other some of these emerging distilleries that you might be working with.
There's a Lady Gaga song that's like poker face. And so I'm gonna keep my poker face. Listen, there are some newer distilleries that we are looking at, that we are talking to, that we will be bottling from, and that's Scotch whiskey. That is whiskey. I'm not going to say what country, but the fact that they're saying yes to us has me over the moon, because their liquid is spotless and gorgeous and exotic and everything that I want to be drinking. So that's going to be coming. We've got some incredibly cool things coming. And so we may be filling some of the holes that you're looking to have filled. I just can't say specifically what said holes are. How's that? Poker face.
It's so diplomatic. I love it.
It was so clandestine and so perverted at the same time.
Listen,
You're welcome.
we all know it's proper 12. You can just say it. It's fine. MMA,
Right?
I mean, the Tyson fight, we know where we're going. It's fine. Lean into it.
Listen, I've been practicing my MMA. It's going to be, this is how you punch. Is that how you meant to do it?
I'm a lover, not a fighter. I'll take your word for it.
There you go.
Oh.
All right.
You know, Joshua, thank you so much. I don't want to keep you any later than we absolutely have to. This has been absolutely wonderful once again. You know, you guys are always welcome to come back and hang out with us. We love having you here.
Thank you. It is, as always, a pleasure and great to see some familiar faces, some new faces. Birkin, you were at the tasting last night, weren't you?
I had a conflict, so I had to join and drop out. So I have to watch the recording for that one.
Okay. Oh, so I'll send you a link to the recording then.
And I hope to meet you guys in December in Chicago.
Oh, shit. Yes. It'll just be me. And I'll be wearing a kilt. So no staring at my knees. All right. All right, ladies and gents, I am off to bed. Thank you all so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. Really lovely to see you all and spend time. So enjoy the rest of your Wednesday and the rest of your week when it comes.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.